In this video, I'm going to explore a range of responses to the question about how Stevenson presents Mr Hyde as a frightening outsider in Jekyll and Hyde, which appeared in the AQA English Literature set of sample papers. If you're studying Jekyll and Hyde with OCR or Edexcel, this video will still be helpful as the questions have pretty much the same structure, where you are invited to first consider how something is presented in an extract, and then how it is presented in the novel as a whole. The exam paper, including the extract, can be downloaded from the AQA website at the following address, and I have provided a link in the description section under the video. In the AQA paper, the question is as follows. Starting with this extract, how does Stevenson present Mr Hyde as a frightening outsider? Write about how Stevenson presents Mr Hyde in this extract. How Stevenson presents Mr Hyde as a frightening outsider in the novel as a whole, 30 marks. Please note that this is not an exhaustive answer, nor is it an exemplar. These are just some ideas for you to consider incorporating into your own responses by adding to what you have already covered in class. Stevenson uses descriptions of Mr Hyde's appearance and behaviour to present him as not conforming to traditional Victorian social mores, with allusions to religion as well as to the theory of evolution, in order to present him as a frightening outsider. Stevenson uses language to describe Hyde which associates him with other outsiders, or people who were shunned during the Victorian era, such as the mentally ill and those with deformities. There is something wrong with his appearance, which is displeasing and downright detestable. The use of the indefinite pronoun something is deliberately vague to unsettle the reader, and the alliteration in the phrase downright detestable serves to emphasise the extreme emotional response and revulsion that the narrator feels at the sight of him. There is a suggestion that Hyde is not of this world and does not belong in reputable Victorian society. Hyde is described here and elsewhere in the novel as having a deformity, although without any nameable malformation. Individuals with deformities were shunned by Victorian society, although at the same time the general public had a ghoulish desire to be frightened and entertained by them. Freak shows, where for an admittance fee you could go to stare at bearded ladies and those with facial deformities, such as John Merrick, known as the Elephant Man, were commonplace. With Hyde, though, there is a suggestion that this sense of deformity is emanating from inside of him in the form of a foul soul, and influences how his physical presence, or clay continent, is perceived when Utterson says, "Is it the mere radiance of a foul soul that thus transpires through and transfigures its clay continent?" His appearance is also described as being pale and dwarfish. The use of the adjective pale suggests that he is unhealthy and untouched by the sun, with its connotations of wholesomeness and growth. The adjective dwarfish suggests that he is shrunken and ill-developed morally as well as physically, all of which creates an image of him as a frightening outsider. Stevenson uses the simile, like a madman, to describe Hyde's out-of-control behaviour when he murders Sir Danvers Carew. Mental illness in Victorian England was treated by confining people in asylums or madhouses, which were synonymous with prisons. The mentally ill were feared and shunned as the general public thought that they were proof of the degeneration of the species. Doctors treating the mentally ill were known as alienists rather than psychiatrists, because the mentally ill were perceived as being alienated not only from society, but also from themselves. This once more links Hyde to the idea that he is a frightening outsider. The way in which Hyde's behaviour is described also sets him outside of Victorian social norms. Victorians had a strict social code of conduct. Their behaviour was very prim and proper, and formalities were important. When Utterson remonstrates with him that it is not fitting language, after Hyde accuses him of lying, it is evidence of his shock at Hyde's blatant breach of etiquette. And the way in which Hyde tramples upon the little girl at the beginning of the novel sets his behaviour apart from the norm. Stevenson chooses a defenceless female child as his victim to demonstrate that there is no line that Hyde will not cross in order to get what he wants. He does not seem to have any moral compass, which is, in itself, very frightening. Stevenson alludes to the theory of evolution and to Cesare Lombroso's influential theory of criminality to present Hyde as an outsider. With the publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species and the Descent of Man, there was a suggestion that humans could look to primates, such as apes, for their ancestors. Lombroso went one step further, to propose that there were differences in physical appearance between offenders and non-offenders, which he referred to as atavistic characteristics. For him, criminals were throwbacks to an earlier stage of human evolution. In the extract, Hyde snarled aloud into a savage laugh, and Stevenson also describes him as troglodytic, with its allusion to primitivism and cavemen. Elsewhere in the novella, he is described as ape-like and a monkey to imply that he is less evolved than normal Victorian people and is prone to fits of animalistic aggression. He is variously described as a creature and striking with ape-like fury. Stevenson also uses religious imagery to present Hyde as an outsider. Religion was a dominant force in the lives of many Victorians, and regular church-going was de rigueur. Morals were black and white, and it was believed that the devil acted through people when they committed crimes and evil deeds. Stevenson uses these beliefs to create a character, in the minds of the reader, who is the very personification of evil. He describes him as having Satan's signature upon his face. A signature is put on a work of art to state ownership. Thus it is suggested that his face shows evidence of his having been created by the devil. Elsewhere in the novella, the simile, like a damned juggernaut, is used to suggest that he is a powerful force which is condemned by God. His breathing is also described as a hissing intake, which alludes to the serpent and therefore to Satan and original sin, and would have resonated with the fears of his Victorian readership. Stevenson uses the murder of Sir Danvers Carew to further enhance the idea of evil, embodied by Hyde, determined to overthrow the forces of good, as there seems little motive for his attack, other than that the old man seems to exude, or give off, such an innocent and old-world kindness. The most shocking part of the novella, of course, is that Stevenson's readership, convinced through his use of language from semantic fields relating to deformity, mental illness, atavism, criminality and the devil, that Hyde is the epitome of the degenerate outsider threatening the balance of civilized society, would discover that the frightening outsider is, when all is said and done, within us all. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.